Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Simon's Book Club, where we will be discussing some of the best books on psychology, well-being, mindfulness, neuroscience, relationships, communication, and digging into ideas that are just good for our well-being. So this video is a bit different than the others, as I'm not doing a deep dive into one book and exploring it for an hour. This video is more in line with the spirit of Christmas. So last Christmas, I had a friend who was looking for a gift for her mom, and she told me a bit about her mom, and then I recommended that she get a specific book for her mom as a gift, and she did. And her mom loved it, and that felt great. So I figured I'd try offering something similar here. Recommended book list, and to talk about the books just a bit and why you might be interested in them so that you can get these books for someone else, or yourself, really. So the first book on my list here is The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Van der Kolk. I probably should have looked up how to pronounce his name before I started this video. So this book here is hugely important. I see it on many book lists. This was the first book that I read that really got me to be more interested in trauma. Before, I was really dismissive of ideas of trauma, and I really didn't think about what it meant to be triggered. And I just thought that people really needed to toughen the fuck up and stop being so fragile. And then I went through my own breakdown, and I found myself a lot more interested in understanding trauma. Trauma! Don't knock it till you try it. I don't recommend trying it either. It's not fun stuff. So, you might have heard about PTSD before. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, this book is written by the most famous researcher on it. He spent 30 years studying it, and he really knows his stuff. He talks about what happens in the brain when we're traumatized, what parts are activated, and what parts are specifically deactivated when we're experiencing a trigger. It's amazing stuff. It's not as simple as sad memories make me feel sad. No, our brains, which are really our bodies, are just acting in different ways. They're hurt. It's like I recently jammed my finger playing basketball and I can't bend it down all the way again. It's not because I'm being weak. It's not because I'm being soft. It's because my body's just not responding the way it usually does. So the book really helped me to understand the physical aspect of psychological trauma. Your mind isn't separate from your body. Your mind is your body. The idea of mind over matter, the idea that you are in full control of yourself and that when you're not doing well, it's because you're weak or not trying hard enough. It's not just insensitive, it's wrong. Our minds are embedded in our bodies. And really learning about trauma through the lens of this book helped me really understand this mind-body connection a lot better and helped me to open up to feel more compassion and understanding and curiosity for the people who are suffering from trauma. The next section of the book was about childhood trauma, which I wasn't at all expecting in this book. And then it talks about the ACE score, which measures your adverse childhood experiences, and it gives you a score out of 10. And mine was a lot higher than I expected it to be. This book really helped me to open up to re-examining my childhood in therapy and to integrating with the parts of me that I was trying to cover up, which in the end was really healing for me. And then in the third part of the book, it talks about different kinds of therapy that can help you process your traumas. And it taught me about both EMDR and neurofeedback, both of which I wound up trying just because of this book, and both of which were very huge for me as well. Truly, this book has been so helpful in my healing process and helping me to understand myself a lot more and in opening me up to being more empathetic and understanding of the trauma of others. Now, this might be an odd gift to give someone for Christmas. Here you go, Billy. It's time for you to work on your shit. Merry Christmas, mother. Next on the list is James Nestor's Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. It's not written by the guy that discovered breathing, and the author's name doesn't hold the same credentials as the previous author, but don't let that distract you. There is still a lot to explore in the science of breathing, and Nestor does a great job here of showing how the science has change and how some of the things that are held to be true now in science were dismissed just a couple of decades ago. He looks a lot at the wisdom traditions and their understanding of the breath and shows how their conclusions are slowly being reached by the science that we now hold as a gold standard nowadays. This book will not only get you to think about your breath in a different way, but will also get you to thinking about how different breakthroughs in science become mainstream and accepted. I was very excited when I found this book because I meditate daily by focusing just on my breath until I get distracted by a thought, of course. And so when I heard about this book, I thought that it could really help me have a better appreciation of something that takes up a whole lot of my day's attention. I learned the importance of slowing down the breath, the dangers of breathing through the mouth, how breathing affects your teeth, and the importance of a full out breath. There's a lot of cool stuff here beyond the growing popularity of mainstream breathwork. This isn't just Wim Hof stuff. If you know someone's into the inactivity of meditation or into the activity of sports, I think they're going to find this book really interesting. And I'm sure they're going to change one or two things about how they breathe. Check it out. Merry Christmas, Billy. It's time for you to stop being a mouth breather. This book's for you. The next book on my list is a classic. It's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi. And hey, I love this book. So I don't really talk about Buddhism and meditation as much as I'd like to here, as I've already freaked out enough people with my new voice and mannerisms. But Buddhism is a major part of my life now. And I found that mainstream meditation practices through popular mindfulness apps kind of to me sound more like small therapy sessions. And while I think that's super helpful to many, and I don't want to discourage the use of these apps at all, I find that they kind of stray from the spirit of Buddhism. A lot of these apps sell the idea of being goal-oriented, with the ideas of calming your mind or how to be less distracted, with being more productive. You were like this before, and with this app, you can be better, healthier. I think that fosters a sense of striving, along with a lack of acceptance of how you are, with the idea that meditation will fix you. Now, from what I've heard by different meditation masters in different traditions like Tibetan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism as well, this sense of striving in meditation is kind of against the original instructions of Buddhism. So this here was the first book of Buddhism that I ever bought, back when I was in Japan. And it's not really left my bedside. I read a section of it most nights before I go to sleep. There's a very famous line in here which says that in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the expert's, there are few. Now, this book helps you cultivate this sense of a beginner's mind, not to view yourself as an expert, to not think of progress or growth, but to continually sit with the curiosity and openness of someone who is brand new to the practice. This teaches you not to have expectations, but to be open to things as they are, because resisting things as they are is a cause of suffering. Because after all, every experience that you have is different than the one before. Every day is different. Every breath is different. You can't step in the same river twice. And the person that you meet today is different than who they were yesterday. Now, I know that is super woo-woo for many of you, but if you're looking to buy a gift for someone who's been interested in mindfulness for a while, then this book, I think, is really going to help deepen their practice and take their practice to another level. Merry Christmas, Billy. What was the face you had before you were born? If that last book seemed a bit too esoteric, then Bringing Home the Dharma by Jack Kornfield might be another option for you to consider. It's written by one of the major figures who brought mindfulness and Buddhism to the West, so it's very respectful of the Buddhist traditions that have been appropriated into the apps that we use today, while it still really holds space for the major benefits of Western mindfulness, with awareness of how Buddhism has to be adapted to be digestible for our Western sensibilities. I think that point has to be considered. And yet the author is also able to see the shortcomings of traditional Buddhist heritages, like especially in the treatment of women in these traditions, right? He handles all sides with compassion and, I think, great knowledge. Homie has been in this mindfulness world longer than I've been alive. he's contributed to this boom in mindfulness the way Michael Jordan has contributed to basketball's popularity. Homie knows his shit. Now, in this book, he tells amazing stories about how he was a monk in the forests of Thailand, which for me were the most vivid and delicious parts of the book. There are many times over these past couple of years that I really thought about running away into the woods and becoming a monk as well and dedicating the rest of my life to meditation. And there are times that I still do feel this way. The author, though, does a good job to show how spirituality alone is not enough. He does a lot to demystify the guru tradition as well and talks about how many spiritual leaders have huge glaring faults. Now, just because they might have had some cool meditation experiences that you didn't have, it doesn't mean that they're living ethically afterwards. Now, there is a long list of very abusive gurus and spiritual masters. Meditating a bunch doesn't solve all your problems. No, it sure doesn't. I know. So if you got someone close to you who's really into meditating and starting to get deeper into it, then I think this book is going to be really illuminating for them and make them question some of the things that might have been overpromised and kind of will give them good insights into the history of the flavor of mindfulness that we have right now. I'm currently reading another book of his called A Path with a Heart, and I'm loving that as well. I really like what Cornfield has to say. So, Merry Christmas, Billy. You can't run away from your So those last 3 books have not been very science-oriented, and I'd like to get back to those people who find anything spiritual uncomfortable. I understand that. Here is some cold, hard science. Now, this is a book written by a very famous and well-respected neuroscientist, Anil Seth, and he's written my favorite book on consciousness called Being You, A New Science of Consciousness. Here's a book that was just published last year in 2021, and it's a synthesis of the most up-to-date findings on what consciousness is. Here's something really cool. Did you know that they have machines now that could measure levels of conscious activity and determine if people in non-responsive states are still there? That's crazy. I think that investigating our consciousness is very important. How do our brains work? How do we get free will? How do we come to believe that there is a self or a me at the center of this experience? These bodies that we have don't come with an instruction manual, and our lives are mostly determined by the countries and the families that we've been born into. But what's behind all of that context? So this book, I think, will really change the way you understand what you are. How is it that your vision works? Now, I used to think of my eyes as kind of like cameras that point out into the world, and whoever I am is just looking at the world through the screen behind the camera of my eyes. Kind of like if you hold up a phone and like you see what's on the other side there and here, like that's what I thought eyes were, but that's not how our eyes work at all. The things that you see, the ideas that you have, the way you move, the way you feel, they are surprisingly and unintuitively different than how they seem. There used to be a time in history when people believed that the sun revolved around the earth. And why is that? Because it seemed that way. But just because things seem a certain way, that doesn't mean that's how they are. And so it is with our ideas of what it means to be awake and conscious and present and alert, and really what it means to be alive. I can't share enough excitement about this topic. I think it's the most important question for us to examine in our lifetimes. What does it mean to be you? Not your patterns, not your habits, not your preferences, not your memories, not your beliefs about society, but what is the you behind every thought that pops up. So Anil Seth calls our conscious experience a controlled hallucination. And he has an amazing TED Talk that goes into this idea in great detail. It's just like 20 minutes long. I'm going to link to it in the info box below if you want a sample of the ideas about the book before you buy it. And if you like the TED Talk, you're going to love the book. So I'm going to do a full review of this book soon, sometime after this next book club video that I'm working on, which is How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. Merry Christmas, Billy. It's time for you to wake the fuck up. The next book on my list is Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which is finally a book of fiction. It's not too serious. It's not too deep. It's not too woo-woo and not too sciencey. I've only been talking about nonfiction on this list, as nonfiction is what I mostly read nowadays. It's kind of hard for me to get into fiction now because so much of it is conflict oriented, and I am a man of peace and love. Don't you know this by now? I got this book as a birthday present last year from someone who really passionately told me how much they loved it. So I thought I'd give it a chance. And you know what? I really liked it. Now, the idea here is imagine if you could go back in time and do things differently and explore some of the possibilities that passed you by. What if you stayed with the one that got away? What if you stayed together with the band? What if you went on that trip that you always planned? How would you be different? And more so, would you be different in a way that you could accept? If you could get a do-over in your life, would you like the person that you became? Or is it better that you let that opportunity pass and that you became who you are right now? It's a good question. This book does a great job of exploring the idea of regrets and does so in a really kind of magical way. And I really love magic in literature. So this was a very fun and cute book. I didn't really like the main character all too much, and I didn't agree with the way that she handled things, so I kind of struggled with her for a bit. But overall, I put down this book with a smile on my face, and I think whoever you buy this book for is going to enjoy it as well. Merry Christmas, Billy. It's time for you to stop complaining about your regrets. So that's it for the book list here. I've got many more books that I would love to share, but these are on the top of my list of recommendations right now. I hope I've inspired you in finding a gift for someone for Christmas. And if you've read any of these books before, I'd love to chat with you about the ideas that resonated with you the most. Come join me over on my Discord, where we've got a really nice community of people there who talk a lot about the ideas in these books and in others. And thank you as well to the people who are supporting me in this project on Patreon and who like this message that I'm trying to share. So the next big video I'm working on is for Lisa Feldman Barrett's How Emotions Are Made. I hope you get a chance to check that out soon. Here's a small tip. That's a beefy book. And if that book is too long for you, she also wrote a book called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, which is a quick read and which will give you a good handle on the direction that I'm trying to go with talking about brain stuff here. So I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Mwah.